welcome everyone. We're just waiting for people to get loaded into the webinar. And so as that happens, we'll just say welcome. Thank you for being here. And we'll look forward to a good conversation. I'll introduce us all in just a few minutes. We'll just give it a minute or two for people to get into the room. Okay, that looks pretty stable. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Eva Agard, and I am the Vice Chancellor for Medical Education and Senior Associate Dean for Medical Education. And in COVID, I've been the Senior Administrator over Occupational Health. And you've seen a lot of communication from me over the last year and a half. And really, a lot of that has been medically focused. And the issue around the COVID vaccine is both a medical one, but it's also a very personal one. And this has been a very stressful time for many people, particularly since the announcement of the COVID vaccination requirement. And so I wanted to take a little bit of time to just talk about people's stories around this, and to give an opportunity for people who were named by you and your peers as people who they really trust and who they honor, and hear from them about what their experiences with this have been. And all of the folks that you're going to meet today were gracious enough to be willing to be quite vulnerable to talk about this situation. And so that's really the purpose of today. And towards the end, I'll do my best to answer medical questions that arise. As you know, there's been a lot of medical information that's been shared already, but I'll do my best to do what I can, and other questions that come up that are related to that, or towards human resources kinds of questions. We'll do our best to answer them, and if we can't, we'll make sure to find those answers and try to solve them for you and send them out for everyone to review. So with that, I'm actually going to ask for our panelists to introduce themselves, and I'm just going to go in my screen order. And so when I call your name, if you could just say who you are and what your role is here at Washington University, and I'll start with Jamie Ryan.
Hello, I hope everyone's doing well. So I am Jamie Ryan. I am the Executive Director of Business Operations for the Operations and Facilities Management Department here at the School of Medicine. And I'm very happy to be on the panel today.
Thanks, Jamie. Stephanie. Oh, Stephanie, unmute.
That's slightly helpful. I'm Stephanie Hunter. Most of you guys probably know me from administering the UPass program. However, now I am the manager of shuttle and mobility services, which means that I oversee our shuttle system on the Danforth campus. I work as a liaison between the university and Metro, and also coordinate all the buses that used to come to campus bringing visitors. So I'm happy to be here also.
Thank you. Mark.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Hume. I am Director of Facilities Engineering here at the School of Medicine, and happy to be part of the panel today.
Thanks. And Dwele.
Good afternoon. I'm Ndwele Jolly. I'm the Executive Director of Business Administration for the Department of Pathology and Immunology here at the School of Medicine. I'm also happy to be here on this panel to add my lens to this important issue.
And last but not least, Mario.
Hi, I'm Mario Turner. I'm the Director of Custodial Services for the medical campus. I've been with the university for 13 years, and I'm also looking forward to having this conversation with you all.
Thank you for being here. So I'm going to start with just the first question that I have, and I'm going to start hopefully with you, Mario. I want to know, before you got vaccinated, what were your thoughts about the vaccine as it was coming out? And and how did you feel about it?
So initially, I was looking forward to it because, with me working in custodial services, unfortunately, we had several members that lost family members and had close friends and relatives get sick and pass away. And so I was able to see some of the, real world effects of that. So I was really excited that, a vaccine was coming out, and I was really looking forward to getting it for myself. And also kind of encourage the team members to get it as well.
That's great. Thank you, Mario. Did anybody feel differently than Mario?
So one thing that comes to my mind, as Mario mentioned, are the first responders and those who are on the frontline staff that have to be on campus or have to interact with patients. And so I think it's one of our responsibilities as colleagues here on campus that we think about the importance of the vaccine as it relates to looking out for one another. And then personally, I'm sort of biased to getting the vaccine, one, because my mom's an epidemiologist, so I grew up around that knowledge, but two, because I have asthma, and my three children, who are all born prematurely, all have asthma and breathing issues. And so importantly, as Mario pointed out, the reason for getting the vaccine is not necessarily for thyself, but for keeping those who are most vulnerable to the disease healthy and safe. And so I think that's what brought me to really wanting to get the vaccine.
Yeah, I'll say a lot of my family members were really scared. And I have some family members who remain unvaccinated at this point, including my father. And but a lot of my family was really scared, and a lot of my colleagues were really scared when those of us who are healthcare workers were vaccinated at the beginning, for me at the end of December. We had people who were so scared they were hyperventilating going into it. And so that reaction of fear can really be a normal one too. I just want to call that out, and even if you're excited about it, or you really want to get it, or you really feel like it's the right decision, it can still be really kind of scary. And that's normal to feel that way too. Stephanie, you kind of shook your head. I'm wondering if you had thoughts or experiences with that.
Honestly, I did not. From the first news reports, I was convinced I was going to die. And so whatever vaccine came out, I was going to be in line. But I did have lots of friends not lots of friends, but a few friends who were more questioning than I was. And they had serious doubts about whether they wanted to be, quote unquote, a guinea pig. And some still feel that way, but the majority of them have all been vaccinated. So that makes me happy, and now they can come visit me.
I'm curious what changed their mind, or what shifted in their thinking from initially feeling strongly like that to changing their mind.
I think some of it may have been peer pressure. Some of it may have been, I know a couple of my friends have sick relatives, and the one friend is taking care of her mother who is homebound. And, it was more, like everybody said, the people around them that they, because they were still working, they were still out in the workforce. So, they were afraid that they would bring something home.
Got it. Jamie?
I know for me, my office is located in the EPNIC building, and when the university and the hospital first got, the first doses of the vaccine coming in, and we set up the point of distribution, here in the building, I know I had a lot of people, I was interacting with a lot of people throughout the campus, and I will say people were, concerned about both the immediate side effects, and then possibly, what the longer side effects were. And so I did hear, some of that as we were, starting up, and, there was a lot of information out there, and it was, challenging for people to disseminate it, and people had their own personal situations, or, people they care for, families, relatives. So I know there was a lot of concern about, the side effects. I think we all probably know a lot more, especially about the immediate side effects now. But I remember hearing that was, a concern of many during that period of time where we were bringing people through.
Thank you. Mark, I'm curious, when you got the vaccine, first of all, which vaccine did you get? And then what side effects did you have, if any?
I got the Pfizer vaccine. I was fortunate to get it very early on, being an essential personnel. I received my first shot on December 19th. And when I got my first shot, I did have a little discomfort in my left arm where they gave me the shot, but it wasn't really bad. After that, I didn't have any symptoms at all. So it was a pretty smooth process for me. But really, when I got the second shot, that was even better. I didn't even have any discomfort at all. In fact, I remember telling my wife, I was like, I seen her put the needle in my arm and inject the vaccine, but I don't, it was like I didn't even get it. So no discomfort, no pain, and never had any symptoms. So it was a very pleasant experience for me. I feel very fortunate that it went so well. I was surprised.
Great. Anybody have side effects, Mario?
Yeah, so just like Mark, I was very fortunate to receive my first dose back in late December. And I remember when I went home that night, I was feeling, the chills, and, I was getting achy a little bit. And so I just went on home, having something to eat, and just went to bed. But what's really interesting is when I woke up the next day, I had so much energy. I have no idea where that came from. I had more energy than I ever had before. And just so happened, I had scheduled to be on vacation that day. So I actually ended up getting a lot accomplished around the house with all that energy.
That's great. That's great. Anybody have anything else?
Well, I'll admit, I am not the biggest fan of needles. And so while I also was pretty fortunate to be able to receive the vaccine early on and right here where I work, which was awesome, I was a little nervous about the needle. When I give blood, I definitely have to, look away. But I have to tell you, I'm not, a medical professional, so I don't know what size needle they used, but I barely felt it. I mean, I could have sworn nothing went in my arm. So that was a big win for me. So for both the first and second time, any of, weary needle people out there, it is so tiny. But I was also fortunate, like Mario and Mark. I personally just had a bit of a sore arm for about 1 or 2 days. I think for the first one was about 2 days, and the second one was 1 day. But there were people on my team that had that the fever and chills kind of following the vaccine. But I'll say most of them, told me that really at about the 24-hour mark, it just really kind of disappeared. And so that's, really kind of interesting. So, so overall, it was a very easy experience.
And to your point, my wife and I had different experiences. My wife had a little bit of the fever and chills. I don't recall having anything. Then again, I have 3 kids under the age of 8. So I actually went to bed at 9 p.m. And for those who know me, that's like super early. So that's the largest side effect that I had was I actually got sleep, much like Mario. So that felt good for a day. And my wife gave me a pass. She's like, "Oh, you got the shot." So I played it hard and was able to get to go to bed early.
Ooh, bonus. All right, so I'm going to switch conversations a little bit to talk about having discussions with others. All of you are, we're pretty excited about the vaccine, but not everybody is. And some people have a lot of fear and concerns. I'm curious first, what some of the fears and concerns you've heard people bring up have been, and then aligned with that, when you're talking to them about those fears and concerns, how have you had conversations with people about them? And why don't we start with you, Andwele?
Yeah, there were a few, and actually even some from my mom, who's an epidemiologist, right? So people who are in the space are not even immune from having some hesitancy, and hers was around the mRNA vaccine versus the Johnson & Johnson, because she was much more familiar with how the other one, the latter, worked versus the newer technology. Although being new is not really, I think it's just new in this way, but it's been around for a while. Those who are scientists can certainly comment on that more explicitly. But the questions around whether or not it's too new, the guinea pig sort of thing, or do they make it too fast or bring it to market too fast, et cetera. And then I would just encourage those to just go on the websites, read about it, much like I did, and know that the testing phase, a lot of the stuff is done in parallel between the development and the production. And so they're able to bring it to market quicker, and hopefully we can leverage that going forward with other vaccines. And then other parts of it where it was just that it's been around and how does it work. And so I think people were convinced to go ahead and get it because they had more knowledge about it. Other folks worried about the side effects. And I think we talked about that a little bit today. Common the fear is that the worst you may have is some fever and chills for a 24-hour period, but know that the risk of getting the disease is much worse than any 24-hour period of discomfort. And then I think the last thing, folks may have attributed the vaccine or getting it is to their sort of political ideology versus it being really a public health issue. And so those were sort of the three things that I encountered when talking with folks. One, am I sort of an experiment? No, because again, I think the sample size for the testing was a lot larger than any other vaccine trials out there. And two, the side effects are definitely not for most. Again, you would have to verify with your own provider. The risk of getting the virus is much worse than I think, the side effects of the vaccine. And then three, this is really about all of us being in this together. And so those are the three things that I think folks expressed to me. And most times I think I was successful by just providing my own experience as well as directing them to sources that were publicly available, either in CDC or even our own website, or even connecting them with faculty here in my Department of Immunology, where folks are doing the research on the vaccine. So,
thanks, Andwele. Other folks, Stephanie, anything you want to add?
I certainly, my friends who had objections, I don't know if it was really based on hard facts or just, I've heard a couple of them say that the history of African Americans with vaccines bothered them, and things along that line. And they just had a general distrust of the vaccine, also because they felt that it was developed so rapidly. But I don't have the medical arguments, but my argument to them was, we're living in a worldwide pandemic. It's not something that you can just sneeze at, and like Adwale said, the benefits would largely outweigh, any detriment to getting it, I think, in my humble opinion. And you have to, as others have already said, you have to consider those around you. I have a daughter who has medical issues. I've already talked about my friend with her mom, and also some of them have younger grandkids who are not able to get a vaccine, but they're able to get the, to get the virus. And so you just have to, I don't want to overstep, but you have to use, in my opinion, common sense and weigh your options.
Yeah, so pretty much the same thing as Stephanie and Stephanie said about, there's several team members on the custodial side that they were talking about, the history of how African Americans were, experimented on in the past and how the vaccine came to market too quickly. And, I would have conversations with those individuals and, unfortunately, many of them were single parents. And I would just, kind of talk to them like, what would your kids do? Like, if God forbid, something were to happen to you and you go in a hospital, you're on the ventilator and, if things don't work out, I mean, you got to think about your family. I mean, no one else is going to be there for them. Just don't think about, what you read on TV or what you saw in the newspapers years ago. I mean, just really focus on your family and the people close to you, because that's what's really important. That's what it comes down to, is being there for your family and friends when they need you.
Yeah. I'm curious if I can ask a question. This is an honest question from me as I'm listening to you talk about the way that sometimes I talk about, especially this question about how quickly it came to market. And I'm wondering if I can sort of say it and then you can react to it honestly, truly, honestly. Okay. That's what I'm asking for. So one of the things I often start with is that we have known in the medical community, in the infectious disease community, about coronaviruses as a risk for well more than a decade because of the initially SARS and then MERS, which are both related kinds of viruses. And so there had been work and research happening in this space for well over a decade. Those of us who lived in those two spaces will remember that we had a very similar kind of response that happened associated with that, except it never became a pandemic. It was very localized. It was an epidemic. And so there had been all this research happening. And so we already knew going into this that this spike protein that is the target of the vaccines was the appropriate target to go after. We already knew that from our research. And then some other things had been happening in the background around vaccines and new ways of delivering vaccines. And so the flu virus and other virus vaccines that have been developed have used viral, like a shell of a virus to deliver pieces, not whole viruses, but pieces of viruses that allows people to develop immune response from it. That's the J&J vaccine. That's what it does, right? It takes a virus that doesn't have any ability to cause an infection. It essentially makes it unfunctional. And then it puts pieces, not whole virus, pieces of it in and allows it to create an immune response. And then separately, really Ebola in particular drove the mRNA vaccination space. And so the Ebola vaccine is an mRNA vaccine. And this technology basically allowed us to rapidly create vaccines because all of it was already in place, basically. The second piece of it, though, was that in addition to making it, usually a big part of the delay is that you make it, you test it, only once you test it, you start producing it. And so that's a very slow process. But our government took away the risk, and governments around the world took away the risk of that for the companies and had them at the same time as they were testing it, start to make it. So it was ready to deploy. And so this is why we were able to do it faster. It had nothing to do with testing whether or not the vaccine was safe. In fact, the studies on the vaccines were some of the biggest studies that have ever been done on any vaccines in history. And now, in addition to that, we have millions and millions of people who have been vaccinated, which has never happened before in the world. And we have a very active database to monitor in real time people's side effects from these vaccines. So this event that we have playing out now has never happened in the world before. And we have more information about this vaccine actually than any other in history. So that's, how does that, when I say that to you, does it make sense? Is it too much information? Is it too little information? Is it confusing? How does it feel? How does it land to you? Be honest. And Dwelly knows I like that.
I'll defer to Stephanie to go first, or Mario.
Yeah, so it makes sense, and I've heard that before, but obviously I'm not as deep involved with it as you are, so there's no way I could reiterate that to my staff. But yeah, it does makes a lot of sense to me.
And maybe from a layman's term, I would say what you said basically is that we didn't start from scratch. The process was started off at second base, if you will, and that makes sense in terms of getting it out to everyone more quickly. You didn't start from zero. You started, I don't know, halfway there, and thank goodness. Thank goodness, that the information was there to get a good jump start on. I'm thankful.
I like the way you put it better than the way I put it, Stephanie, and much more succinct. Way to go. Any other comments?
And I think maybe for anyone questioning the variety of companies and the different vaccines, I think your point about removal of risk, was really important for all of that research to move so quickly and to bring different vaccines to market. I know there's been a lot of controversy in the news about which are better, and just why different ones were brought to market, which work better. I know there's vaccines from different countries also that are perhaps less effective, and what's working on the new Delta variant. And so there's a lot that goes into all of this, but it's continuing to be educated and learn about everything that's out there, and being so grateful for the researchers and the medical community that's continuing to keep us all safe.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I did hear you said mRNA was too new, and then J&J, the Johnson & Johnson, was not as effective. And so they were trying to play in this limbo space of what do I do? What do I take? What do I not do? And to your point, they're all effective against the virus. And so to whichever one you have access to, I think, take it.
Great. So then the really last question is, what advice do you have for two different people? So for people who are unvaccinated and scared and worried, what advice do you have for them? And then for people who are talking to people who are in that space, what advice do you have for them? Mark, why don't we start with you?
I think the things that I would stress is that I do feel that the vaccines are safe, that they are effective, and that they are a safe way to help build protection. And I think I was seeing some statistics on the rate of vaccinations and what have you, and what really stuck with me is the state of Illinois has a much larger rate of their population vaccinated than the state of Missouri, and they were showing some graphs about how in Illinois the the rate of infection and the positivity rate and the hospital admissions has really dropped off and plummeted. But here in Missouri, where we have not vaccinated as many people, the positivity rate is much higher, and that the rate of new infections is higher, and the hospitalizations are going up. In fact, I heard the other day that here at Barnes Hospital, that our hospital here, that the amount of COVID patients has increased significantly over the last several weeks. So with all these different variants, I feel it's really, really important more now than ever to do it. But I think the statistics show for themselves that it works, and it's keeping people healthy.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, in fact, our hospitalizations have doubled in the last week. Yeah, so it's a real thing. We were in the 20s 2 weeks ago, and now we have 53 patients today in the hospital with COVID specifically. And Dwelly, additional advice?
Absolutely. The stats are alarming, and one of the things we always talk about, when are we going to get back to normal? And Lynn Dole in Central Human Resources always says it's not going to normal, it's going to the next normal or the next new environment. And I think the sooner most of us can get vaccinated, the sooner we can return to doing things we all enjoy. And I think that's critical for the human interaction and being close to one another in a very productive way, whether it's at work or with our family or in society. So I would say, I know there's a lot of questions and angst about it, and that's understandable. But to a degree, you can leverage each other in terms of experiences and or resources to information that's reliable and credible. It will give us our best opportunity to find that next new normal, and we can start to do things we used to enjoy much more freely.
Thank you. Mario.
Just piggyback on what's already been said. It's just you have to look at the stats that are out there. I mean, look at where we were a year ago compared to where we are now. I mean, I know a year ago you had infections going up, you had deaths. I mean, they were just going through the roof. And look at where we are now as a nation. And I think a big proponent of that is we have a large percentage of our populations that are going out there getting vaccinated, or at least getting that first dose. So, I think we're going in the right direction. Yeah, we still have a long way to go, but, we still need to continue to talk to the team members and encourage our family members to get vaccinated, and just let them know what the facts are, and not focus so much on what they read on the internet or what they get on Facebook or whatever, so.
Thank you. Jamie?
Yeah, I agree with all of the comments, and just that it is just more important than ever right now to trust in science and to trust in our medical community, here and in our, CDC, our local, we have the infectious disease experts right here on campus, and that we really, to Lynn's point, we want to go get to the next normal, whatever that is, but we really want to make it a safe environment for faculty, staff, and our students to return to campus and to return to, education, research, clinical care. I've been the sole caretaker of my mother throughout the pandemic, who's had multiple surgeries. And I know when I bring her into the hospital or to doctor's appointments, I'm so appreciative and grateful for the safety precautions that are in place. And it's just more important than ever that as a community that we provide a safe place for our community.
Thanks, Jamie. And Stephanie, last word.
Oh boy. I think that the getting vaccinated is important. We live in a world right now where you have to make explanations if you cough or if you sneeze or, I'm okay. I just, it was allergies and like that. And people want to get back to normal, as what's been said. My daughter goes to daycare and they are taking the kids to the movies next week. And I was excited because, it's normal to get back into those activities. But then I got home and I started thinking, oh my God, I need to give them wipes and they need to wipe down the seats and they, all these things that run through your mind now that never occurred before COVID. And I just think if you don't, maybe this is kind of going to sound crazy, but if you don't do it for yourself, do it for those around you, do it for your loved ones, do it for your community so that we can get back to doing those things. It's a joint effort. And if you need help after you get your shot, I'll come over and bring you some chicken soup. That's the layman opinion of it all. All of the medical advice and all of that is wonderful. But we're not going to get through this unless it's a joint effort. So that's all.
Amanda, any additional questions for our panelists that don't fall into the medical and HR realm?
Yes. How has your life changed in a positive way since receiving the vaccine? I know some of you have talked a little bit and given great examples, but can you expand on that?
Well, I'll have to tell you that I was so relieved. I had no idea how super anxious I was. I still kept my mask, I still kept precautions going, but I felt like I could go out and get groceries and I could safely go to work and then go take care of my mother, be around my family, my kids. But I had this huge sense of relief.
Agreed. The stress level, although still there, because it's always in the back of your mind, my stress level has gone down tremendously. I entertained a couple friends at my house a week or so ago. And I think that in itself, in addition to feeling that I was able to, I didn't have to mask up. Well, of course I mask up, but I didn't have to worry about, is this the one with the 3 layers or is this the one with the 4 layers, or it's less stressful. I'm going to shut up now.
Definitely, and not having to do takeout all the time, right? So my wife and I started to resume some more dating out, and that's been helpful. And which means we could find sitters who are vaccinated because of our children. So the degree of freedom has definitely improved, I think, my personal life in that way. But even with colleagues now, being able to sit with a colleague in the conference room. I just came back from an in-person meeting, which doesn't happen too often, and being able to sit there and go through a presentation together. So I think I think it's enhanced my life in terms of the degree of freedom that I've had since getting the vaccine.
Great. Amanda, any other questions that are?
Not related to staff stories. We have a lot of medical questions as well. So
Yeah. Well, why don't we turn to those maybe? Oh, go ahead, Angela.
No, I think I saw briefly folks asking, the necessity for the vaccine versus treatment. I think there's a general thread there, and my general, I'm a physical therapist by trade, right? So some know me as just an administrator, but as a physical therapist, we always talk about prevention and enhancement, and in general, I would say if you could prevent, it's going to be much more valuable than waiting for a treatment that may or may not work for you, or the disease process in itself could be mild, but it could be severe. And we've seen that through the demographics. And again, Dean Agar can speak to this much more cleanly, but I've seen healthy people succumb to the virus, as well as those who may have had comorbidities. So why gamble? Why not prevent it if you have the opportunity?
I think as a general internist, strongly agree with preventive strategies as being better. And also, I'll just say that none of the treatments that we have are all that effective. And they're very much in the experimental stage of looking for things that are really effective. And there's a lot of things that are out on the internet that are just frankly unsafe and wrong. So for instance, sometimes we get questions about ivermectin, which is actually an anti-parasite drug, and there's actually a warning on the CDC website about this to not take it because it is not being studied and is not effective. And same thing with hydroxychloroquine, which was removed for this purpose very early on in the pandemic as not effective. So just really want to encourage people to look at respected medical websites and to speak with your doctor or infectious disease specialists about which treatments are effective and which ones aren't. And to be really careful about the information that is out there, unfortunately. Thank you for that. All right. So Amanda, what other questions do you have for Leanne and I? So Leanne, you haven't gotten a chance to introduce yourself. So why don't you introduce yourself before we launch in to the medical and HR questions? And hopefully some of our panelists will be able to also help out if either of us get into trouble. You'll be our safety net.
I was hoping to get away with not introducing myself. I'm Leanne Stewart. I'm the Director of Employee Relations within Human Resources. So I'm here to answer the HR questions. I guess we could say it that way. Amanda, I think you had said you had another question for our panelists as well. Is that right?
I did. I just one more while you guys warm up for your portion is, and by the way, I'm Amanda Pope. I'm the Director of Employee Engagement and Communications. So the question for the panelists would be, did anyone get their vaccine in the community? And just, do you mind sharing your experience with that? Or did you get it on site? What was your experience there?
So I got my vaccine on site here, and it was a very smooth process. They let you know when to show up, you get the shot, you leave, you come, they reschedule you for your next vaccine or next shot, and you just come back. So here on campus, it was very smooth.
I got mine in the community. I was on every list in the United States. And a friend called and said, call this health center. And it just happened to be like a mile and a half from my house. I was considering driving 3 hours away to get it. And I went there, I called, and she got me and my daughter on the list, and we scheduled. We had our first shot within a week, and very smooth process. It was on a Saturday morning, easy as pie.
And for me, while I work here at the School of Medicine, and it would have been very convenient to get it here, I was so anxious to get it. Instead of waiting to get it here, I went to Barnes West County Hospital and got my shot there because I was so anxious. I just didn't want to wait another day, and so I drove out there and got it.
So I think I mentioned before, I was very fortunate to be able to get it right here at my place of work, which was awesome. However, and I was able to get it for my mother very quickly through the BJC system. However, my husband drove about 3 hours outside of St. Louis to secure his shot after working hours on end trying to find a shot. So that was earlier in the spring. I had one of my daughters out in another state, and she ended up having to drive back 8 hours to get her second shot. But then my other daughter got it right here in the community, right over at Harris-Stowe State College. A friend of hers, another student, had sent her a message that they had extra doses towards the end of spring. And so we had a variety of situations in our family, and each and every one of them just worked out great. No issues.
That's great to hear.
And mine was fairly easy, nothing new to add, but I want to special thanks to Dean Agar and Occupational Health here on campus for organizing the efforts here, because it was very well done given the circumstances, and thank you all for that.
Thanks, Andwali. So we have 37 questions in the Q&A, which obviously we won't get to, but thanks for participating to all of you. And also for everyone that put questions in the chat, we will try to sift through that and answer what we can in an FAQ as well. But just to pull out a few, here's one. I read in the news that Missouri has more COVID cases per capita than any other state. Why is that, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, that is such a good question. So the reason that is so is because we have a large unvaccinated population, and specifically we have big pockets of unvaccinated individuals. And so when that happens, it causes a couple of things. Specifically, it allows virus to continue to circulate in the population. What that means for viruses is that viruses as a thing, what they do when they multiply and when they spread is they go into a cell, they reproduce, and when they reproduce, they create variants. So that is an intentional part of their survival mechanism. So to make themselves survive, they mutate, and then over time, those viruses that are more dangerous or more transmittable or more likely to result in certain outcomes tend to have a survival advantage, and they then multiply more. That's how the Delta variant came to be. And that's just a normal part of viruses. That will happen with any virus. But when you have big pockets of people who are spreading virus amongst themselves, not only do you get more virus spread, but you also get more variants that develop. And so that's why vaccination is such an important thing, not just for you individually, but for society more broadly. Because as the virus continues to spread, ultimately it is inevitable that we will have a variant that pops up that's either resistant to the vaccine or that is more dangerous. That's just something that will happen inevitably. So that's why in Missouri, it's such a big problem. And then also in the other states that have low vaccination rates. And while I think it was Mark that talked about Illinois is doing better and New York is doing better. That's why they're doing better.
Great, thank you for that. So another question is, if you're vaccinated but get COVID-19 and have no symptoms, can you spread that to other people?
Yeah, that is a super good question. And the answer is yes and no. So what we find is that if you get COVID once you've been vaccinated, the amount of virus that you have available in your nose or in your mouth, which is how you spread the virus, is way, 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 way lower than other people who get the virus and who are unvaccinated. And so that really reduces the transmission remarkably. And in many cases, maybe completely eliminates it.
Great. Okay. So moving on to talking about, I think we touched on this earlier a bit, but just the J&J and the Pfizer and all these different kinds of vaccines. So someone said, you know, I got the J&J, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, as, you know, I'm sure many people did, but I hear it's not the good vaccine. So, you know, what should I do? And I've heard that some people are getting other vaccines in addition. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And maybe I'll start with a personal story, which is that I was vaccinated with Pfizer. My husband was vaccinated with Moderna in the community. My daughter was vaccinated with J&J literally the week before the safety warning. She's 20, the safety warning around blood clots. And my son got Pfizer. So, and all in different places. And what I would say to them is what I'm going to say to you. All of these are very effective vaccines, and I have no concerns about anyone in my family, which means I have no concerns about you having any of these vaccines. The most important thing about the vaccines is that all of them have remarkable ability to prevent severe infection, hospitalization, and death, which is what we really, really care about, right? That we're trying to prevent people from dying from COVID. It's less about getting COVID, although that's a really nice perk. But the bigger issue is preventing people from dying or having, frankly, prolonged and severe disability associated with it. And I have to say, as a person who takes care of patients in the hospital routinely, including I just came off service just now, we are seeing devastating long-term illness from COVID with really long-term severe sequela in even really young people. I had a woman in her 30s last time I was on service who coded, which means her heart stopped 6 times during her hospital stay. She was in the hospital for 3.5 months. And when she left, when I discharged her from the hospital, I was the last provider to take care of her. She needed someone to help her sit up. She needed someone she couldn't speak. She couldn't feed herself. And she was a healthy person before she came into the hospital. That is a devastating outcome. And we see that a lot, unfortunately. And I know that's hard to hear, but we see it, and it's just tragic.
That is hard to hear. Thanks for sharing that story, though. So another question people have is, kind of surrounding, we're getting various versions of this question. So let's talk about this topic of if you already had COVID, do you need the vaccine? And why would we mandate the vaccine if you've already had COVID previously? So can you answer that?
Yeah, I'll do my best. So remember how I was saying that we had done this research on coronaviruses before, and what it showed clearly was that the spike protein is the protein that having antibodies to this is the most important thing in terms of creating immunity. And that's why we went after that. That's why not me, but we, the scientific community, went after that as the target for the vaccines. In natural immunity to the spike protein is really variable and often significantly lower, which is why coronaviruses in general, which are around everywhere and cause things like the common cold, continue to come back over and over, and why we don't have not had a vaccine for one of the reasons why we don't have a vaccine for the common cold. And so this issue is why the vaccine is so important and why we think it will provide better long-term immunity for individuals and for the public at large, and why we are recommending that everybody, even if you've had COVID, still get vaccinated.
Great. Another question is, and you may have touched on this a bit, but how will we know if and when we need to get boosters?
Yeah, there was actually, that was in the news this morning. There's some trials about that. So I think most of us believe that there will be a need for boosters, whether that's because of variant or it's because of waning immunity, meaning your immune system drops over time, like what happens with the flu vaccine or tetanus or any of these shots that we get boosters for. Most of us think that that will probably be necessary at some point, but we don't know when yet. And today, Pfizer announced that they're going to file for emergency use authorization for a booster vaccine that will enhance its effectiveness even more against the Delta variant. And so we'll see how that evolves. But right now, all I can say is that we are in a holding pattern, watching the data very, very, very carefully to see a couple of things. One, when it seems like immunity wears off. Two, when we start to see rising cases outside of what you would expect to normally see in vaccinated people. So across BJC and WashU, we watch this very, very carefully to see if two things, whether there's new variants that are rising or whether we're starting to see breakthrough immunity. So we're monitoring when there's these cases. And then when we start seeing those patterns, not just amongst us, but nationally, that's when we'll know it's time to start thinking about boosters. Does that make sense?
To me, so I hope it does to everyone else. Personally, I just feel like having this conversation and knowing we have so many amazing experts on our own team at WashU helps so much. That's not at every employer. So I have to say that's pretty spectacular. So I have a question. Leanne, you get a question. Can you talk about, the vaccination mandate we have at WashU, and do we have concerns about people quitting over that?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I saw that in the Q&A. Yes, the WashU does have a concern about that. I can tell you that I've had conversations with a number of managers who are very concerned that valued members of their staff might choose to quit or retire based on the mandate. However, this was a difficult decision. Was not something that was decided lightly by the university leadership. I wasn't in those discussions, but I can tell you that there wasn't decided lightly. But in the end, we're balancing, to Dr. Agart's comment earlier, we're balancing the potential of death or long-term permanent physical implications for people and a public health crisis. And we're trying to be responsible employees to protect every member of our employee population as best we're able to. But no, this was absolutely something that there was significant concerns raised about. There may be people who choose to exit the organization because of it. And it still continues to be a concern.
Thanks, Leanne. So I know we're out of time, but we did have one more question if we could maybe extend by 1 minute. And that would be just to talk about, how do we address concerns about people who are afraid of the vaccine side effects? Is there anything that we would talk about there?
Yeah, I think the really important thing is to listen to people's concerns. I think concerns are normal and natural, and it's appropriate. It's appropriate for people to have concerns, and for us to listen to them, and to try to answer those concerns when we can. And I think there are a lot of concerns being raised about potential for long-term side effects. And I think that's a hard question to answer. And I think what I would say is that there has never been a vaccine that has been demonstrated to have long-term adverse consequences. It's not the way that vaccines are made. It's not what they do. And so is it theoretically possible? Can't say that it's not. Is it probable? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And there is an imminent and severe threat facing our country, the people we love, ourselves.
Well, that's all the questions I think we have time for. So I'll let you wrap it up, and thanks to everyone for submitting meaningful questions. Anything that we can answer, we'll put on the COVID FAQ page. And also you can always submit your questions directly if you have a personal question to covidvaccine@wusl.edu, or view our COVID vaccination policy and see how you can request any support, exemptions, or need more information.
I just want to close by thanking Jamie and Dwelle, Mark, Stephanie, and Mario for their willingness to be so vulnerable and talk about their personal experiences. And I really hope that this was helpful to folks who are struggling. That is my greatest wish, that we help everybody get through this difficult time. And thank you for being here. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Leanne, and thank you to Amanda, Joni, and Jonathan for your